channel, and in today's video I want to do my July wrap-up, and it did not go the way that I thought it was going to go this month. I chose 7 books. I added a book, which brought me up to 8. Only read 6 of those 8. I am I think I have about a quarter left in each of the other 2 books, but I decided I wasn't going to try to force myself to read the last 260 pages all in one day just to be able to include it for this month. So I love both of those books, so I'm still reading them. It just didn't happen in the month of July. So this is the first month where, not the first month where I didn't meet my goal, but the first month where I'm still reading books at the end of the month, going into the next month. Last month I chose 7. I read 6 and just didn't feel like starting the 7th book. So that's why I say this isn't the first month where I didn't reach my goal. This is just the first month where I'm still actively reading 2 of the books that I chose for the month of July. July also saw me get my first disappointing read. I mean, and I think I gave it a 2, being nice, but I was so highly disappointed with this book. And let's just get right into it. So these are the books that I actually completed for the month of July. And I'm just gonna start this off because I don't want to leave this book till last, because yeah. So the highly disappointing book for me was Horror Movie. I was holding on for dear life at the end, and not because it was scary. Like, I just have felt like I went too far in this book, and I was just hoping that something happened. I was hoping something happened. Like, I think I was pretty much done with the book when I realized, like, oh shit, this is it. Like, this is just how this book is gonna go. This I would give 2 stars. I mean, I feel like the story's original, but I feel like I was just expecting so much more from this book. And this is when I finished yesterday, actually. So as I'm reading it, like, I'm just, I don't know, I'm expecting some type of actual horror to happen at some point. And yeah, there are points where you are just like, oh my god, I can't believe that they're doing this to this character. Oh my god, I can't believe, like, this is, there are those moments. But to say, like, horror, or that this is even remotely scary, is, I feel like that's a huge exaggeration. After I finished it, I turned the book around, and I was reading the praise for the book, and then I went online and saw, like, there's one video where the guy, you know, he's just like, I don't get it. And I was like, I'm not the only one, because I don't get why there is such high praise for this book. And I even put on my Instagram page, I was like, maybe I didn't read the same horror movie that everybody else read, because wasn't a damn thing scary in that book. Wasn't, I don't know, I feel like I could have gave that book to, like, one of my kids and they would have been fine. Like, I don't know if I just have a high tolerance, because because I've been watching scary movies since I was a kid or what, but that book just was so disappointing. It is probably the first book where I've ever felt like I wasted my money and my time on. So I don't want to keep going, but I just didn't like it, and that's okay. I'm okay. I'm allowed to not like something. 2 stars, if that. I'm being generous. 2 stars. Okay. Now I'll get into the books that I actually enjoyed. Okay. So the next, well, one of the other books I read was Paradise by Toni Morrison. And I was like on the fence between 4 and 5 stars, but not because the book is bad, only because there were parts that I just didn't understand. So it's very well written, just like Beloved was very well written. Like I love those 2 books. I love this book and Beloved, and I have Tar Baby that I'm trying to read next month. So I love the way that she writes. It's just that there were just things that were difficult for me to understand as I was reading it. And partly through the book, I went to find, you know, not necessarily reviews about the book, but like where people were getting tripped up at. And there were like articles where people were saying like it was hard for them to tell which people were white and which people were black, and I don't feel like I had that issue. It was just, you go from different points of views throughout the whole book, and you learn why all the women end up at the convent, and how even when they leave they end up back at the convent, and you learn about, you know, certain groups of people that built this town, and you learn how the town came to be and where like the power struggle is. And I got all of that. It was just, after being pulled in so many different directions, to actually pull it back together to get what was going on in the book. So like I said, I was torn between 4 and 5 stars, only because I had a, you know, an issue with understanding some parts of it, and there are probably people who didn't. But I'm not those people. So I knew that it was about, there were parts in it where you understood, like, you know, this is a black town that was built basically, and then you have the black people that don't want the race kind of diluted, so they aren't very fond of mixed race people. They aren't really fond of white people coming into the town, and that is where the issues start to come in, because, you know, Connie and the women that initially started the convent, they were white, and it was like, don't go to the convent, don't mess with the people from the convent. But honestly, you weren't gonna mess with them anyway, because, you know, only person that really kind of stepped out was Connie, and she wasn't a nun or a sister to begin with. So at the beginning, and this is why I say it was harder for me to kind of put things together, is because there were so many points of view. Like in the beginning, like I felt like I was listening to, you know, women in an insane asylum, like because their stories were just, it was like everybody had a story, and I get that because we all do, but it was just like how they were telling the story, and then they would cut to what was happening in the town, and then it just felt like I was just being bombarded with all of these different types of people. But I understood, I get where it went towards the end, and the reason why I was torn, you know, even though I didn't understand it, I enjoyed the book, and I knew at the end, like, this is a book that I will always think about, because for one, because I didn't understand certain parts, so my brain's always gonna keep trying to put this together, and also because it makes you think. It makes you think, like, if if roles were reversed, would we behave that way? So that is one of the reasons why I actually enjoyed this book, even though there are parts that I did not get. And like I said, I love Toni Morrison. I'm growing to love her, which is why I have Tar Baby that I'm gonna try to read next month. The next book was I'm sorry. Chromosome 6 by my favorite author, Robin Cook. And I chose this book because it's the first in the Jack and Laurie Stapleton kind of series. There's 14 total, and I believe this is the only one that I had not read. So I got this one, and it did not disappoint. I gave it 5 stars, and I loved reading the beginning stages of Jack and Laurie. Like, if you are far enough into their little history, now they're married with 2 kids, and she is the chief of the OCME. So to see where they started was nice. In the beginning, the parts that are set in Congo, I had a hard time because I don't know biotechnology, so you know, the verbiage that they use in describing the processes and things like that was kind of hard to choke down in the beginning, but it brought out my nerdy side because I was just like, I wanted to learn it, so I just kept reading it, obviously. But I feel like Robin Cook does such an excellent job of, positioning greed and ethics in the healthcare industry. And he makes you think, like, even if this is a technology or just an advancement that you feel that you want or you feel would be good, he has a good way of taking it to the extreme and showing you just exactly how bad it could get. You know, yes, you might want to use these animals to, you know, to breed, to be able to produce organs that can be used for transplants. However, when greed steps in and morals go out the window, this is where we can end up. And I was, you know, nerdy me was fascinated by I don't even know if I'm gonna pronounce this right, but please bear with me. I think, what is it, the bonobos? And in the book, they call them like proto-humans because they adapted so well to the humans that were taking care of them. They, you know, especially with being mixed with human DNA, you know, parts of chromosome 6, which is where the title comes from, they began to develop their own language. They began to walk on 2 feet. They began to separate. And so it just seeing that evolution in the book was enlightening. The one thing that I always take away from his books are that you may not think these things are right there or on the cusp or being done. You know, you might think that we're years away from something, but he has a way of letting you know that it's either happening or we're not far away from it, and it just makes you think. With healthcare being the business that it is, what did I write? You know, I definitely don't doubt that a lot of the things that he writes about are either currently being done or are being planned. And like I said, Robin Cook will always be an auto-buy author. He has a book coming out in December, I believe, called Bellevue, and I'm gonna be right there. So, Chromosome 6, 5 stars. I'm gonna save those 2 books for last. Okay, so it is the next day. I ended up getting a phone call and I was on the phone for like 4.5 hours. So next day, I went over those 3. So let's go over the last 3. Okay. So the next book that I read for the month of July was A Soul to Guide in the Dustwalker Bride series. I believe this is book number 4, and it did not disappoint. This is another 5. Actually, I gave this one 4.5 stars. I did that because I felt like the ending was, I don't know, there was something about the ending that wasn't as good as the previous 3 that I've read, but the book overall is great. This is the first book where I feel like the Dustwalker starts off as this grumpy, rude, etc. type of person. Like, I feel like he's almost going out of his way, but then you realize like that's just who he is because of the life he has lived. He's considered the oldest Dustwalker, but he is not the first Dustwalker. I was not expecting this kind of storyline based on the previous 3. The previous 3, it just seemed like the relationships developed a lot faster and they were a bit more intense, whereas in this one, this is definitely a slow burn, like it just is. But it still like had me hooked from the very beginning, like the other 3 do, and I'm pretty sure the 5th one will, because I already have that one. It was like an emotional roller coaster, just like all the other ones, and there is an understanding that comes from just learning about Merrick's history, and you see why he is the way that he is, and that's what makes it even more amazing when those walls start to crumble when he falls in love. It was also, I wasn't expecting to hear Jabez's history either, and you kind of feel sorry for him, but then you think about everything that he's done presently, and you just feel torn between do I feel sorry for him because the life that he led is what made him to be what he is now, or do I just hate him because he's just on this murderous rampage type of thing. I spent most of the book just wishing that Ray would speak up, because obviously you get dual POV, so you read why the Dustwalker might have said something or why he might have took this action, and then you just see Ray, who is well aware of why things are happening, and she just says nothing, and you're just like, okay, well, if you know that in his Dustwalker brain he doesn't know why certain things are taking place, or he doesn't know why you're upset about certain things, like, why are you not the one that is speaking up? So I spent most of the book just wanting her to speak up and help him understand more of what was happening. But they both had their secrets, and they both felt that if the other one knew, that somehow it would like muddy the waters pretty much. It was beautiful reading about, or I say watching like it's a movie, but you're watching Merrick's walls come down, and he's allowing himself to love and hope and to be happy and to just to have, like, for him, just having hope that he is not doomed to be this lonely, angry Duskwalker. Yes, just like all the other 3 books, this book does have a lot of spice, but just like the other 3, it's like the development of the love story takes precedence. Or, you know, at least that's what I get from it. Like, they're not these raunchy books. Yes, they're very descriptive, but it doesn't overshadow the love story that is developing. The plot twist I was not expecting. You know, it's just, I just thought it was gonna go a completely different way. Like, I didn't think that her people would come and save her. I thought the other option was going to happen. So that part was shocking. It's also like the second book where you see the Duskwalkers get decapitated, and you're wondering how this is really going to end. And it was a surprising ending as well, because of what the people did with his skull. That's why I gave it a 4.5 stars. I felt like it just, towards the end, I felt like the book was too long. I think it was like 628 pages, but by like page 500-ish, I just felt like time to wrap it up. Like, time to wrap it up. Like, something needs to happen. Like, so that's why I gave it 4.5 stars, because it felt like it was being dragged out past a certain point. It did make me want to know more about Jabez. Like, if he had his own book, but at the same time, what would having his own book really do? Because I don't know if I want to read about just maybe his childhood, yes, but like all the killing that he did, and I don't know if I would want to read that. But hearing his origin story does make you kind of want more of it. So, Assault to Guide, 4.5 stars. The last 2 books that I read are more for a project that I've been working on for years, and every time I come across books that help, I just dive right in and everything. So I ended up reading a book called Biased and The Bodies Keep Coming. Now, they're both written by doctors, PhD, and then one actual trauma surgeon. And Bias is basically showing you implicit bias. It talks about implicit bias, you know, how we just innately have this bias built into us that we don't often recognize, and how that bias can affect things that we do on a daily basis. And she highlights, you know, she's worked with, you know, police departments and things like that, where, you know, diversity and inclusion type of programs. And, you know, she highlights these studies where, you know, bad words are often associated with Black people and good words are often associated with white people. So she uses different studies that she has come across, and she, you know, puts them in the book to show you, you know, even when you're not thinking that way consciously, subconsciously, your brain is drawing on all these things to make a decision about something or someone, and that's where your bias comes in at. So this was a great book. I don't necessarily think I want to rate it, only because it's research. It is based on true events, you know, police brutality type events, that she draws on. So these are actual things that have happened to people throughout history, and she also puts a personal touch on it, because as she is doing these talks and things like that, her own son is growing up, and she puts in like these times where her son will be asking her these questions that she can't answer, or you know, that she knows later on as a black man that her son is going to interact with, or you know, these things are going to happen to him, or he's going to be put in those situations where he'll understand. Like I remember, I think towards the end of the book, she talks about her son going away to college, I believe, and he's riding his scooter, and all of a sudden, I believe there's either a white woman or an Asian woman that's on the same path as him, and she sees him coming, and she gets off the path. And so, you know, her son is asking her these questions, and so it's a personal book, but at the same time you see that she's really trying to just put the information out there, like, hey, the implicit bias is a real thing, and these are the studies that show, you know, how the brain is functioning during certain instances where everything else is controlled except for race. So Biased was the other book that I read. And last but certainly not least was The Bodies Keep Coming by Dr. Brian Williams. And it goes over like the racism that he has had to deal with on his path to becoming a trauma surgeon. It talks about, you know, because he comes from a military family, so, you know, he ends up going into the Air Force Academy, and from there medical school, decides to become a trauma surgeon. And so we follow him, like, racist events that happen to him while he's in the Air Force Academy, and events of racism as he is in medical school and his trauma surgeon fellowship. And then once he becomes a trauma surgeon, he talks about, you know, being at some of the hospitals in the most dangerous areas in the country, like Chicago and Atlanta. And he has this way of drawing you in, because he deals with a lot of gunshot victims. And he talks about how, you know, for a while he never thought about it. Thought about it outside of the context of, I'm a surgeon, it is my job to work on these people, try to save these people, that's it. And then there was a particular event that happened that made him start to see his job differently, and it made him speak out more in regards to racial equality in healthcare and in the community and things like that. And you see how drastic a turn his career took once he started to speak out about certain things. And to just, you know, it was just something about being with him as he is, you know, trying to save a patient, and then he'll go into, you know, why medical schools exist, or he will go into how during certain times a lot of the black medical schools were being shut down. He'll go into the civil rights movement. So it's like, as he's telling his own story, he is also weaving in history, but it doesn't feel like he's jamming it down your throat. It just like wraps itself around the story of himself and the story of him trying to teach other students, and the story of him trying to save gunshot wound victims. And you, as you read it, you feel the stress that that role, or the many roles that he plays, is having on him. And it's just, for me, it's a great resource for the project I've been working on for a while. But the bodies keep coming. If you want to learn it from the perspective of a trauma surgeon and learn what he's experienced, but at the same time the actual, you know, bits and pieces of history that he throws in here, it's a great read. 5 stars. And so I read 6 books this month, or the month of July, since it's now August 1st. And I feel like my cap is 6, without trying to like force myself. My cap is 6. So I feel like that's where I'm gonna sit at. But that makes it even harder because every book that I've bought, I truly want to read. So it makes it a harder decision because, and probably in August I'll be able to review this one because I've got like 40 something pages left of this one. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.